In marriage, we are told that you need to learn how to communicate better. But communication isn't your problem. Safety is.
Most of us weren't taught how to communicate. We were taught how to keep quiet.
So, welcome back to another episode of the Mindset Talk Marriage and Family with myself, Phoebe, and
Stephen.
So, last week we spoke about how marriage exposed us. And this week we want to talk about communication and how safe we feel to communicate in marriage.
And we don't often communicate because we don't feel safe.
So let's start from the beginning. Let's start from childhood, how we were taught to communicate as children. For me, we were definitely told that children should be seen and not heard. That taught us how to avoid conflict and not speak up for yourself and share your feelings.
That sounds very familiar because communication was a one-way stream in my home. Our parents spoke at us. They gave instructions and the children were wrong. The parents were right. And even when you try to defend yourself, you would end up being punished because no praatjie mos no tia. And so he was somewhere backhand. And so life was tough growing up. We couldn't speak, we couldn't defend ourselves. And as a result, we withdrew and we kept quiet.
And that behavior followed us into marriage. Because if you're not taught how to speak up and how to be comfortable and confident in sharing your feelings, when trouble does come, the same pattern follows you. You withdraw, you shut down, and you just are not able to break through this barrier because you don't feel safe to do so.
Yeah, and so when there are difficult conversations to be had in marriage, we end up having still paper because we withdraw. And that's been our struggle as a couple when we started this journey. We are different individuals, and difference doesn't mean disconnect. And as you can see, our faces are different. The way we speak is different. Our behavior is different. Our way of thinking is different. And so this thing called difference should be embraced because we need to know that we are unique in who we are and different from the person that we are starting this journey with.
And differences doesn't mean that you are creating disconnection. Differences also doesn't mean a fight. So we can have differences of opinions, and it doesn't mean that we are having a fight. And what I needed to learn about communication and sharing a different opinion or a different view was that it's not going to mean the end of my marriage. Having a difficult conversation doesn't mean that you are arguing and fighting and it's going to cause failure of your marriage.
I think it's important to accept that you are different from your spouse. And for me, that was a key lesson to learn in the beginning of marriage when I discovered that this person that I married does not think the way I think, does not reason the way I reason. And so the quicker you embrace difference, the quicker you become one.
When a person doesn't feel safe to communicate, one of three things happen. They grow silent, they grow avoidant, they avoid the subject altogether, and they just sweep everything under the carpet. And none of that is good behavior if you want to cultivate a healthy relationship where communication is honest.
How do we live with differences? The best way to do that is to try to understand the next person. If there's a difference that you don't like, what is it that makes them different? What is it that goes on in their minds. What is it that they are going through that's resulting in this behavior? A lot of times we tend to make up stories in our minds about what's going on in the next person's mind. We think for each other. And when we do that, the danger issue, you're creating a story and a reality that does not exist. And as a result, your thinking stirs up emotions. And our emotions informs our behavior, because as a man thinks, so is he. So the story that you've now created in your mind, this reality that becomes a reality in your mind, it's not even what's happening in the next person. And so seek to understand them first before you jump to conclusions.
What we learned in being curious to understand the person is that it softens your reactions to them. Because if you speak to them with the understanding of how they were raised, what they were taught, why they believe what they believe, and why they respond the way they respond, you extend that grace to them, and you are able then to communicate to them with that knowledge and understanding.
And it's true, because a lot of times we do not understand what the next person is going through or how they deal with different challenges. And so when we come to a place of understanding, we know how to deal with it. Another verse in the Bible, God says, husband, live with your wives with understanding, not understand her, but live with her with understanding. It's key verse. We'll touch on it a little bit later.
What I remember about our communication styles and what was different at the beginning, and it didn't happen often, but there were moments that Stephen would snap at me, and I would quickly say to him, don't speak to me that way, right? Because when he understood that I respond better when you speak to me in a soft tone, that's how he learned how to communicate with me. And that's how we then share with each other. I appreciate it better if you speak to me this way. So knowing each other's differences and learning how to communicate in the way that they understand you does help to cultivate a better communication style within the marriage. So as a couple, when we learned how to communicate with each other, we must remember how we were raised as children, what we were taught as children, and what we now want to teach our children about communication. So what do you think has been our journey with our kids?
Well, look, our approach to communication, or allowing them to communicate, has been a blessing but also a curse at times. Because while we were not able to communicate, our children have the freedom now, because that is the approach we took. And the method we apply to our parenting is to allow for them to be able to voice their opinion. And sometimes when they speak, you sometimes want to ask yourself, am I your father or are you my parent? Because that's how it's become. But while that avenue has been created, two individuals in our children is what we're experiencing. Because one is liberated in her means or her desire to communicate and speak with us, while the other does not. And so communication is really a choice. You have to choose to take on that liberty to communicate, and that's the only way you're going to start feeling safe.
Yeah. What I also want everyone to understand is that when it came to speaking to our children, we went the transparency route with them. And being transparent with your children is not a weakness, but you are also teaching them that this is healthy. You know, saying what's on your heart, saying what's on your mind, and keeping it real is healthy.
And the period in our lives that we all can remember is the lockdown phase. So prior to lockdown, we would go to work Monday to Friday. We would come home tired, and there would be very little time to communicate, very little time to spend with them. It has been focused on schoolwork and making sure assignments and projects are done, and then it's time for bed. Tomorrow the routine starts again and we go back to work. Then lockdown came, and now 24/7 these two individuals are in your face, and now we need to talk. Now you sit in meetings and they want your attention because to them there's no boundaries, there's no limitation.
Yeah.
And so we had to find a way to change our reality and be different and treat them differently and make time to talk. During that period, we started speaking as a family. We started having family devotions. And so communication really grew. While other families could not handle each other's presence, I think lockdown drew us closer to each other because for the first time ever, our children got to know who we really were. I remember times when they would be surprised at the type of person I am working, making jokes in meetings and being in meetings almost the entire day. And so for them, it was new to get to know this person that usually was in the office and is now at home. So they got to see all sides of their parents, and communication really grew during that period of lockdown.
So it's healthy to share good communication skills with your kids while they are with you in your care, so that when they start their marriage journeys, they have a model to follow. If you're feeling challenged about the way you communicate as a married couple, we've designed a 7-day prayer guide to help with these conversations. You can get it by clicking the link in the description.
And to make it interesting for everyone to know, we've actually gone through it ourselves. So we're not sharing anything with you that we would not use for ourselves. Every time you read it, you are challenged because there's more and more things to talk about. And then you have the opportunity as a married couple to start praying together. So that's the foundation.
So go get it. The link is in the bio or in the description, and it will be delivered straight to your inbox. Communication requires us to ask each other questions because that ignites a conversation. So what question do you have for me?
What makes you feel safe when we talk?
What makes me feel safe when we talk? When I have your undivided attention and I feel that you're listening to me and you're not interrupting me, I feel safe to talk to you.
Just as long as it's not during a soccer match.
So my question is, what makes it hard for you to speak openly?
I think the offense is a key factor. I tend to overthink because I don't want to offend you. Mostly because I don't know what your reaction is going to be by what I'm about to say. So in the moment, I tend to resist, or I tend to withdraw, or I tend to withhold my comment because I'm not sure what the reaction is going to be. So again, that thinking for you comes into play.
So these are tough questions that we need to ask each other and get honest responses and go deeper into answering them. Okay, so we've just got something that we need to talk about now. But that brings us to the end of this week's episode, and we want to challenge you to get deeper into communicating in a healthy manner. And remember, marriage is learned, not mastered.
And communication is learned,